This is the London Fintech Podcast, bringing you practical insights and approaches, stories and inspiration from the innovators who are building the new world of financial services. This podcast is brought to you by NextWave, strategy specialists and solutions for financial institutions. This is the London Fintech Podcast, and today's episode is all about AI agents. Today I'm speaking with Robb Wilson, a pioneer in AI and experience design who's led innovations for Apple, Microsoft, and Adobe. Robb's now CEO and co-founder of OneReach AI, an AI agent orchestration platform. He's also the co-author of The Age of Invisible Machines, which is a best-selling book on AI agents. It was the first book on the subject. He's host of the Invisible Machines podcast with UX Magazine, and that's a top-ranked podcast focused on Agentic AI, on offering practical clues about AI in 2 years from now. So a fellow podcaster on the show, that should make this conversation easy. Agentic AI is certainly what the analysts would call a mega trend in the sector and something that we're discussing ever more frequently. In fact, the AI space is moving so fast that there are several big headlines every day, and you can date our episodes by the references to things that we mention in these conversations. Yesterday, Anthropic announced Claude for Financial Services as a comprehensive solution for financial analysis that transforms how finance professionals analyze markets, conduct research, and make investment decisions. So essentially a vertically aligned enterprise-grade co-worker for finance professionals. So in that context and everything else that's going on, some of which I talked about on my recent AI special, today's conversation couldn't be more topical. Welcome, Robb. It's great to have you on the show, and there's certainly lots to talk about.
Oh, yeah. And will be for a while.
For the foreseeable future, I think. So where are you speaking to me today from? Where's HQ for you?
Berkeley, California.
California. Okay. Well, good to see you. And through the miracle of remote podcasting, and we are in the same room for the next few minutes, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
So you started OneReach AI, I think about 12 years ago. You've written a book. You've won over 100 AI business, tech, and design awards, and you write for the Harvard Business Review. So clearly a busy person. Can you tell us a bit about your early influences and career journey to date?
Boy, it's how many hours is this podcast? Let's just say it all begins with, the story of like failure of UX and design of our software. And I don't think we see it as failure. I think a lot of people see it as success. But if you really looked at the amount of software we make and the amount of software we actually use and the amount of software that gets made that gets used, it's abysmal failure. I mean, it's an amazing amount of money that gets invested into software building. You just look at your phone and the number of apps on the App Store and how often you use anything other than like 7 apps. So I think if you kind of look at it through that lens, you realize like, we need a solution to the fact that we have a ton of software we don't really use. And I think it's just an interface issue, and did 12 years ago and said, if we could interface with software the way we interface with people, it's going to change everything. And I better write this down in a book, because when I tell everyone like, no, I saw this coming, I needed proof. Because everyone was going to say that, right? And they do now. Oh, I saw this coming. Like, where's your book? But it's funny when you write a book about, and I didn't even consider this, you write a book about what you think is going to happen because you're working in this technology. So you're not like essentially predicting the future. You're just telling people what you're seeing, right? What's happening in your little bubble. You imagine that you're going to write it down and everyone's going to read the book and go like, "Oh my God, this is so valuable. It's the truth about the future." But you realize the future hasn't happened, so nobody knows it's the truth yet. So they don't actually value it in that way. And so it's not till your second revision that it means anything, and people understand that you have a track record of being right.
So for you, which came first, the book or the company?
The company. The book was just me tired of having the really long conversations with people and like, I know a short, scalable way to do that. I'll write a book.
Yeah. Everyone I know in the founder community has at some one point either written one or thought about writing a book. I have to say I've not yet, but those who have, they say the best business strategy is just to give it away because it gets your message across.
Yeah, I mean, even if you have a publisher, you're essentially doing that as an author.
So, and what were you doing, in the run up to launching OneReach AI? I mean, I guess what led you into perhaps seeing the future a little bit ahead of a few other folks and getting the company up and running?
Yeah, I had a company called Effective UI. It was there's a few people have heard of companies like Frog or IDEO. These are kind of high-end design technology firms. We call them diviner firms, right? It's design and development. And I just had one of those, and we competed with those guys for, you know, high-end innovative projects. You know, things like Microsoft launching Silverlight, if you very
Yeah.
few people will remember that, but it was a competitor to Flash, and they're like, oh, we need like a really cool example products, and so they'd come to us. Or Apple, when they released the first iPad, you know, came and said, hey, we need 8 killer apps. Can you come up with one of them? So just those kinds of projects, the sort of looking forward, leaning in, high visibility, good UX, great design kind of, ideas that they wanted, us to generate,
Yeah.
and Adobe with Flex, and the list goes on, right? It's you got something cool, but the world's not going to appreciate it until it has a UI on it.
And you sold that business, right?
I did to like OV. It was like a big ad firm.
And the next step was OneReach, right?
Essentially, I wanted to look at some of the biggest problems in the world.
Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, from there, I'll sort of figure out what my next product will be. To solve the hardest problems first, and then see if one just connects with me. And that just came down to, I guess you could start with the IVR. Just like, what's the worst example of software, and like the most hated example of software in the world?
Call centers.
And it was the IVR. Like, you couldn't find anyone that didn't hate them. You're like, okay, I'm going to go after that problem. And so that's kind of where it all started.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, we'll talk about that some more in a few moments. I mean, I always ask guests on this show just to get more of a personal intro, what they do when they're not working. Most people I speak to seem to be working pretty much 24/7. But if you have any off-duty time, Rob, what is it for you?
Yeah, it's, to me, between work and family, that's all I have room for.
Yeah.
So it's my family. It's not that I work all the time, but I do spend a lot of time with the fam.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, family comes first. I couldn't agree more on that one. Before we jump right into today's episode, a quick thank you to our sponsor, NextWave. NextWave is an award-winning consultancy that is helping many of the world's leading banks, investment managers, and insurers deliver on their growth, efficiency, risk, and control goals and transform their businesses. With a senior team who have come from MD level positions in major firms like HSBC, Barclays, and UBS, NextWave has both the deep industry expertise and the hands-on capabilities in AI, data, and automation to drive real results. More business outcomes and less PowerPoint from the consulting experience, as their clients like to say. NextWave has moved 2-week manual processes to 5-minute agentic automations, rescued global banking regulatory control programs, and digitized deal platforms, sustainability, and regulatory reporting systems. And they do much of this with hands-on engineering capabilities on leading technologies, which include ServiceNow, Alteryx, Quantexa, and Camunda. So if a modern and specialist alternative to the big brand consulting model sounds appealing, one which covers the full life cycle of strategy specialists and solutions, but with small practitioner teams, rapid delivery, and a better price point, then perhaps you should talk to NextWave. Visit nxwave.com to find out more and get in touch. That's nxwave.com. All right, let's get back to the episode. So let's talk about agentic AI, and perhaps start with a broad brush. Age of Invisible Machines is about conversational AI. So perhaps let's start there. Can you just define conversational AI for us?
Sure, it's like the word that we used before people called it LLMs. So, a lot of the terms that we use in the book and came up with were, our version of the terms. They weren't really established yet. Like agents, we called them intelligent digital workers. And so, as the terminology sort of caught on, we've kind of switched the words we use. But conversational AI is just another way of saying LLM.
And is it different to agentic AI? I get the parallel with LLM, but the agent word's used a lot currently. And sort of, where do you see the distinction?
Distinctions, like, if you look at the folks that I work with, and as we talk about what we're building, right? We don't use words like AI when we refer to each other. We don't use words like agents. Those are like words we use to relate to the rest of the world and relate what we work on to the rest of the world, So an agent to us is just the difference between machine readable output and human readable output. So if an LLM is outputting text, is it machine readable or is it human readable? And when it's machine readable, then to us, it starts to get into the idea of agents, which is a machine telling another machine what to do in real time. So to us, we call these ephemeral apps, which is essentially software being written on the fly
Mm.
and one time. It's like the spork, It's like the plastic cutlery, right? Like
Yeah.
now we have software that's part of a transcript of a conversation. It's not something we built up front and deployed. And so agents to us is like the beginning of, what will be these hybrid applications that are half will be written during the conversation and half will be, that system utilizing pre-existing code.
And the under the agentic tag,
Hmm.
as the sort of broadly accepted definition goes, that includes the agency, the ability to drive the keyboard or the mouse or to take action. Is that so? Does that fall in your definition as well?
It
Um,
does, but it's broader for us. It's who's instructing who.
yeah,
So, when you go to an LLM and say, write me a poem, that's you instructing the LLM. If the LLM instructs you or the LLM instructs a machine, we think of that as agency. In the UX world, we're like, who's leading the conversation? Like a dance. Who's leading the dance? Are
yes,
you following or are you leading? If you're telling it what to do, then it's just, this basic interaction. If it's telling you what to do, then it's what people are calling agency, right? I don't know that sure, it's a usable word and it's why we don't use it internally, though. It's not very accurate. Um,
yeah.
it's not very helpful to us as we're building this stuff. The bottom line is who's driving? Is this a machine-led conversation with another machine or human, or is this a human-led conversation?
I love that distinction because the agent word is being bandied about
Yeah.
all the time, and that distinction of who's driving, who's leading the conversation is a
Hmm.
sort of clarity filter, I think, on
Yeah.
some of the interpretations that are out there.
I think a lot of people don't realize that the tool that it's driving could be a person. I think that's a distinction I don't find people talking a lot about, but in our world, whether you write a function or a JSON object, you trigger a tool to do something using MCP or something, or whether or not you just ask a customer service person to review a bill, right? Or review your bill. What's the difference? Honestly, it's to the machine, it's just leading and trying to drive action.
We're talking a lot with clients about human synthetic workforces and co-workers. A lot of
Hmm.
enterprise firms are still at the stage of experimenting with sort of single agent vertical workflows. They're just using some Gen AI to do some interpretation. By extension, once you get them working with each other, so to your point about driving other agents and then cooperating as a co-worker with the human workforce, that's where a lot of the opportunity lies. But in the regulated FS industry, that's still a relatively visionary target state, I think, for many firms.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you look at it from the design standpoint, you go to a service tool and you say, hey, I want to review my bill or I have a question. Whose objective, right? You led with your objective to get an answer to your question or to resolve some issue. The second you give the agent an objective that isn't just to serve your objective, now you're saying it's an agent because it has agency, because it's not aligned with your objective. So its objective might be to sell you a savings account.
Yeah.
And now it's going to try to veer the conversation from, oh, here's your bill, but have you thought about putting this in a savings account, that extra balance you have on there? And once that happens, I guess people want a word for that, and agency and agent seems to be the word. From a technology standpoint, I don't see that there's like, I think a lot of companies are trying to package this as a technology, but it's really a method and way of using an LLM.
Yeah, again, very, very helpful. So I guess we've started the conversation with some literacy and level set on some of the language around all of this. And it's a nice lead into OneReach AI because you have an agent orchestration platform. So perhaps it'd be good to understand, where do you sit in the whole ecosystem and what is OneReach doing?
So to me, it's a simple idea to say that, now a computer is driving the conversation or has its own objective and it's working on behalf of some other person. But it's another thing to try to implement that in a reliable, safe way. I mean, that's where everyone gets scared, right?
Yeah.
When we start thinking about machines making decisions for us or on our behalf, we get nervous, and rightfully so, because we see that these word predictors are just that. They are word predictors, and if you want to keep them safe and scalable and all of those things that are critical to machines talking to other machines and making decisions and having objectives, there's a lot of components that you've got to put into place. We call it objective oriented coding versus object oriented coding, because when it comes to machines making decisions, they're very capable, way more capable than people think right now. But at the end of the day, it has to be a human that takes responsibility. Like the way our laws, the way our society is structured, some human has to take ownership of the objective of any machine. You can't have a car out there self-driving, running into people and then no one be responsible. So you need a platform for these things to run on that's almost like an office building is to a set of employees, and employee handbook is, and all the rules that are structured around humans. You need more rules when it comes to AI. Um, some people call it an operating system for agents. I think of it more broadly. It's like, if you're going to run software, you need laptops, you need operating systems, you need firewalls, you need all of the things that make it safe for a human to operate a computer. If now we're talking about an AI operating our computers for us, you need a broader set of structures for them to work in that make them safe, that allow them to follow your rules. And the number one thing is canonical knowledge. I know that's like big word for a lot of people in terms of, canonical, but what it essentially means is, what is true in your company? What is your vacation policy? And although we have data in companies, it represents a very small component of the actual knowledge that exists in companies. And we realize that a lot of canonical knowledge in companies, or source of truth, is in people's heads. I don't know. Ask Bob. Where's the official place for writing down the vacation policy or the onboarding process? Where is there someone's going to say, "Oh, our document repository." You're like, "No, there's like 5 documents that all conflict, written by 5." That's not a canonical place. So people will think, "Oh, I'll just point an AI at my knowledge, document repository, and then it'll just run my company." And that's a terrible idea, because unlike, our structured data that's thoughtfully placed, thoughtfully kept up to date, we know a source of truth. And even that we struggle with, but much better. There's not that for knowledge. And so essentially think of OneReach at the very top as canonical, like a constitution, a place for knowledge where you take it out of people's minds and you place it into a repository so that agents are operating in the context of truth for your company. It's a long way of saying it, but they need truth to not make mistakes.
That single standardized source of the organization's data as a foundation. So your orchestration platform sitting over the top,
Knowledge, right?
orchestrating the data, but also the model usage and the governance and the integrations with all the corporate workflows and corporate systems. Am I getting that right?
And the main thing is managing that canonical. So what is our policy, right? The system itself should have a person or a group of people that it's like, this is the person who gets to decide, right? And so if someone else says, our policy is this, it doesn't start changing the policy because rando person in your company decided to convince the LLM that they had the power to change the policy, right? So So the system has to go out, find out who's responsible for this area. It's not going to be that one person decides everything. And so you've got different knowledge, different ownerships of knowledge, and then knowledge just sometimes expires. So it's got to go out and check, is this still relevant? When it's not useful and somebody sees a mistake, there's got to be somebody. So you need a manager. We based this whole system off the NASA's acknowledgement system. They have, I think one of the most successful examples of as you can imagine why, people die and things blow up if they don't get this right. And they have examples of just, one team working in metric and another working in imperial, and like something blowing up, $100 million gone just because inches and millimeters were confused, or centimeters rather. And so at first, before you can deploy agents, you need a canonical truth. You need a place that they can check to say, is this what is accurate for your company and organization? Without that, you just have a bunch of agents operating with random prompts and policies that who knows who decided what they were.
Well, look, I'd like to talk in a couple of minutes a bit more about how you put these platforms together and where some of these projects and initiatives are going. But just to get the broader context on OneReach, I mean, you've been going for quite a long time. You referenced NASA as an influence and input. I'm curious, how's it going so far? What sort of clients have you got? And I think you've got a couple of hundred data scientists and engineers on the team at the moment, if I'm right.
Yeah, yeah. It's going well. I mean, in the beginning, all we could sell was automating complex stuff because nobody knew what agents or LLMs were. And so like GPT-2 and 3, were still very useful to us, even though it was in a, narrower context, they still were very effective at a lot of things. And so trying to, our pitch was just, software can automate simple. There was this category of things you can automate with regular software. It's simple processes that tend to happen often, like scale, we do this often. It's static, so it doesn't change very often. So when we see this, like, oh, it's a use case that is repetitive, it doesn't change very often and simple, then we go, okay, let's use software, right? And then some company sees like, oh, this repetitive task is the same across 100 companies. I'm going to make a company that sells software to all companies that does the same task the same way. And that's kind of where everybody's framing in software is, right? It's these tasks. Well, there's the rest of the tasks that fall outside of that are complicated, that change often, and that aren't maybe done 10 times a month, right? That aren't never made sense before now to automate. So we would go into companies and say, all right, let's look at the stuff you're not even considering automating. And of course, the hard part was then we'd say, and let's start with the simple stuff. And they'd say, but I already have software for that. And we'd say, yeah, but you got to learn. And then we get stuck in this. But eventually, some people would understand that, and they would, they would sort of buy into this idea and trust that we could automate some of this complicated stuff. And and so they were very few and far between. Now you got a lot of folks dabbling, POCs that are failing, but they're trying, which is what everybody says to do, try and fail, which I'm not a believer in AI, but others say that's the way to get through it. It's not, our experience is failure is not the way to get through it. You shouldn't fail, and you shouldn't be okay with failure in AI. That's a bad idea. What you need to do is rethink the objective. If people are they go into it with the wrong objective, they use a software objective. And so if the answer is like, it's okay to fail the way you used to set objectives, fine, but that's irrelevant. What's your new objective? You should succeed at that. And if it's, whether it's a cost savings objective or whatever, it's just rethink the objective and then, succeed with AI. Failures could be catastrophic.
We would always say that you should set the objectives should be the business objectives, and the AI or the automation is a tool to get there, but you should be measuring success on the outcomes for the business.
Right. Yeah. A lot of software is measuring the objective as did you complete the project?
Yeah.
Like, okay, not that shouldn't be it in AI. You should rethink that.
Yeah, well, growth, efficiency, risk, and control. Everything fits in those three buckets, and I have a sort of mini thesis on that topic. But that is the business strategy, and that's where you should start. The tooling is just a means to get there. I'm curious. I mean, you're multi-sector, but I know you've worked with some of the biggest banks as well. What's your take on what's going on in the AI revolution in financial services at the moment? Because I think I can call it an AI revolution. I mean, every conversation that we're having in the consulting space and on here, and there's so much focus.
Yeah. So to me, it's the speed is everything. The speed of innovation is that's the thing that makes it a revolution, right? That's the thing that's completely crazy. You know, if you look back at financial services, it's changed a lot. At the speed in which it's changing right now, that's unnerving, and it's not an industry used to fast change. It's kind of crazy, and for good reasons. It's a super secure and industry and requires security, and security and speed don't usually go together very well.
No.
So I think when you think about what's happening, and I struggle with this, like I can see the destination, I can see where we're all going, but I can't see how to make money in the meantime as well. It's a difficult because what we're talking about is like incremental improvements on our old stuff until our old stuff is thrown away. So we think about like Amazon. A guy who used to work for me went over there and built and designed Amazon Q. But one specific part was like migrating the old mainframe code to Amazon services, right? And it would take years. Now it's weeks. And you go, well, what are the implications of that to the mainframe world? It's massive, right? This complete revolutionary change in how software is made. And you say, well, if you can migrate mainframe code you can migrate anything. You can migrate your SaaS product, anything you've built, right? And you can rebuild it from scratch. And what ends up happening is that old code is just canonical knowledge. It just turns into the rules of your business, and it's rewriting the code from those rules of your business. And so in fintech and financial services, it's still going through that like point solution change. Like, how do we make the old way of doing business better? And then there's this revolution. And I don't know when people realize like 1/3 of products purchased will be purchased by AI, not humans. Like that's the new consumer. And it's already happening. Like people are coming to us because they asked ChatGPT, what's the best agent runtime? Or they went to Claude, and they all include us, right? They say, is OneReach the best? And then they come and say, well, Claude told me to come talk to you guys. Like, so at what point for the smaller decisions are you like, and once you find the best, just buy it? And what does marketing look like? And what does the transaction look like? Like everything shifts when 30% of what's purchased is done by AI. And then what about microtransactions and like once you give AI, it's like you have a kid, one of the first things you do is you teach them how to use a bank account so they can survive in the world, right? Like that's, if they never learn that, they can't go out into the world and be very useful. It's one of these like core things, your first bank account, your first in the US checkbook, and the same things for AI. At some point we're going to give it a bank account and a checkbook and we're just going to be like, okay, our bank is our AI. There's no like institution. That's our AI. It could sit on our phone and it can manage our money, and we're not going to care where it puts it.
Yeah, there's a convergence and a tipping point that I think is hard to put a timeline on. There's a huge momentum building up, and we talked to some big institutions who say, "Oh, nothing's changed in 15 years," or we've got a bit of co-pilot going on the side of the desk. But then you have lending or insurance AI startups that are doing purely AI-driven underwriting or credit. It's completely the opposite ends of the spectrum. And then there's the thing that you were talking about, which is this sort of convergence of technology where the AI is one part of it, but then we've got the whole blockchain and token asset stablecoin thing going on, which is the other mega trend, which is, by the way, how you put the value, the money in the hands of the robots. So the robots are then going to be able to go and do the 30% of purchasing. It's a little bit like what's happening on web search at the moment, where the AI search is now overtaking organic search, and
Yeah.
everyone's losing out on the click-throughs because the folks are just that was someone flipped a switch at Google to
Yeah.
sort of switch that on, and this happened in a matter of weeks.
Yeah. I think like everything's yes and no. So when you ask Western Union back in the day, like, oh my God, people are going to change the way that they transfer money. Western Union is like, no, they're not. We're going to be doing this for the next 20 years. They're not wrong. They still are. There's still people doing it the old way. So they didn't lie. Yep, you're right. Just you'll keep like those people who say we're going to keep doing business the old way. Don't worry, we got another 10 years. Yep, you do. There'll be less of it, but you'll be doing it the old way and then someone else will be doing it the new way. And slowly and slowly the new way will eat away at the old way. And so when they say they'll be doing it the same way in 10 years, I can't disagree with them. I think they will be. There'll still be people wiring money the old way, just not as many.
Yeah, and they won't be doing as much of it.
Yeah.
We spoke to a bank that I won't name this week, who's apparently my team came back and said, "You won't believe it, their desktop infrastructure is running on Lotus Notes." And I was like, "Is that even possible?" So there are pockets of legacy infrastructure.
Yeah. If someone said Lotus Notes isn't going anywhere, they didn't lie. It's still there.
Yeah. So, considering this symbiotic future of humans working alongside AI, and I think you talk about designing better than human experiences, and
Yeah.
it's got an acronym BHX, one that I have not come across before. But perhaps you can tell us about that. What's the BHX?
So you think about self-driving cars, they have to drive better than humans for us to trust them. It's a human component of us to say, I'm only going to trust that thing to make decisions when it makes better ones than humans. And that's a phase we're in, but we'll be in that for a while. Well, the same with, our customer experiences or employee experiences. If all we do is just automate the same experience that you had with a human, that's not going to be satisfactory to your customers. They're going to be like, you just saved money. You didn't improve your customer service. You just saved money. And if that doesn't translate to a clear savings on the customer side, which usually it doesn't, then why would they appreciate it, right? So machines can do things humans can't do. And this is where I feel like anthropomorphization of machines is great to help understand them and to transition. But in the design world, they call it skeuomorphism. It was the moment we created a calculator app on an iPhone with a screen that had drop shadows and buttons that looked exactly like a calculator, like totally unnecessary. But we needed this transition to understand this new technology. And so us treating machines like they're humans is just a phase of UI that we're going through. And companies like OpenAI, they're really leaning into this. Like they're looking at trying to make these things as human as they can be. You look at Tesla, they're going to make robots that are in humanoid form. You're like, why? And the answer is because jobs were designed for the human form, tools were designed for the human form. And therefore, like the first phase of automation is to like replace it like a human would. But if you go beyond that and you go, well, machines can conjure up interfaces on the fly. So it can send you a map with a pin. It doesn't have to, if you're stuck on the side of the road and you're texting and you're like, I need a tow truck. Like, where are you? I'm by the tree near the exit with lots of cars. Like, okay, it's very difficult in language to figure out where you are between a person and a tow truck driver. But a machine can send you a map and a pin, and you can just here's where I'll grab it from your phone. You can locate the pin and just hit send, right? So we think of like, how do you enrich the experience, go beyond what a human would do? Start with an overachiever human. What would an overachiever do in this situation if they were a call center rep or employee? And then you now go beyond that, design that experience, make that your goal, and then design an AI experience that goes beyond human. And then people will appreciate that you've automated it. So it's using automation to like leapfrog versus just save a couple bucks.
Yeah, and there's a really important context dimension here as well. I was reading something ahead of this recording around a study that's just been done of different job types and the alignment or not between the human workers and the propensity for agents to do the work. And there's a whole category of jobs like court decisions and judiciary where the humans definitely do not want the robots anywhere near it, but the robot arguably could be quite good at it. So there's a sort of a smart choice to use the machine, and there's other situations where it's a much higher risk to do that. So I think you have to take the context into account as well.
Yeah, I think this is where the AI and the anthropomorphizing this stuff breaks down. Is it's not AI, it's not agents, it's not agency. What we're talking about is something that's been happening for a long time. It's machines getting smarter. That's all. Machines have been around. They've been killing us for a long time. They're dangerous. This isn't new. Atomic bomb is a machine. Machines are dangerous, but they're also really useful. And so I always think of like a skill saw, one of those power saws. And you're like, well, there's the power saw that doesn't have a camera and can't tell the difference between cutting through a 2x4 and a finger. And then there's the one who can. Which one do you want? Right. And someone saying, I'd never put an AI on my power saw. Come on. Of course you would. Like, you're going to have less fingers lost.
Yeah, but you want the AI power saw, but you want a friendly one.
Yeah. And friendly just means like it doesn't need to be generally intelligent. This AGI thing is it's just a red herring. It's another we don't need I don't need a general intelligence on my power saw. I just need one that knows the difference between a finger and a piece of wood.
And we talked a little bit just now about that better than human experience and using the machines to amplify the output. I think you've also referred to, maybe it's a step in that convergence between human and machine, imposter syndrome and changing, change the machines to be more human. Or should we be changing the humans to be more machine-like and change their job titles? I didn't quite understand that one anyways.
Yeah, we're trying to address the fact that that most people just they're not equipped for this new world. They don't understand the tech. They don't, mostly the design side. They don't understand how to design in an AI first, another buzzword that's been created, world. And organizations are like trying to figure out, do they hire AI teams? What do they do? How do they get their people trained? Do they take classes? And I've just noticed that one of the biggest leaps you can get in terms of changing the culture in your company, if you want them to be more focused on AI and automation, is just change their job title from senior accountant to senior account automation specialist. And they just
Brilliant.
immediately start to feel imposter syndrome, right? They're like, but I don't know anything about automation. So then they start learning so they can live up to the title you gave them. And so I just find that the title can lead the culture change versus look for people who know this stuff and then give them the title. And so it's crazy how well it works. As humans, we don't like the idea of being, especially in finance, like nobody wants to be unqualified.
If I want my consultants to be more solutionist focused and more technical, I should start calling them forward deployed engineers, and they can all go get a job at OpenAI.
Yeah, off they'll go. Like, shoot, I better start taking classes in this. People will start asking them questions they don't have the answers to, and that's not going to go well.
Yeah. So I did a AI special on the podcast a few weeks ago, which was sort of top-down state of AI in financial services, addressing a few of these themes. I think we're going a little bit deeper here, and I'm loving the conversation. I tried to open up on a few myths. I called it a myth-busting discussion, and I was talking about the Terminator versus the toaster, and sort of AI as a co-worker rather than a threat, perhaps, at least at this stage in the evolution. But do you have some AI myths that you find that you're coming up against all the time that are holding companies back? Maybe some of your clients. I'd love to know if there's a few stories there.
Man, where do you start with the myths? First of all, most, when I wrote the original book and you went to LinkedIn, there was nothing about agents, LLMs, and now suddenly there's a bazillion experts on it, which is like, it's taken me a lot of years to get where I am. And I still feel like I don't know the half of what these things can do. So all these experts surprise me, and they're out there, saying all kinds of things that people are believing and then repeating. And so I don't even know where to begin. I guess just you could start with any LinkedIn feed and just give me the first post. It's probably wrong in some way. But the biggest one I think is that this stuff is that like our old software, what companies want is like a simple, they look at something, oh, that looks hard or that looks complicated. Like I want a simpler way to do this. I'm going to choose the AI vendor based on how easy it looks to implement. Right. This is the new world where businesses will win because they take complexity off of their customers. It's the whole transaction cost thing. Like businesses that succeed are going to have to lean into complexity, not try to look for simple ways to make money. The simple use case that you can automate across 100 companies, that's going to be free. That's open source. That's no one's going to pay for that. Companies that will succeed are the ones who can do the complicated stuff and aren't afraid of complexity. Like that's why we model NASA, because every company is going to have to be super aspirational like NASA is with how they do business and complexity. And so I find that people want AI agents and then they want it simple. They want to buy it like they buy their old software. And when we go show what a runtime looks like and all the things you got to do to protect yourself when you want to use these things that will never change, they kind of hide their head and say, oh, but I could just go get Copilot from, Microsoft and just do this add-on and check the bugs. And of course, it doesn't help. So complexity, I think, is the one where people still think they can get away with a simple business.
I mean, it is inherently complex in the box, although I think there is standardization coming across the AI architectures. And you mentioned MCP servers and things earlier on, and there's sort of AI control towers and LLM governance components emerging in some of these platforms and infrastructure. So I think it feels like, at least to me, that there's a degree of standardization coming in, but there's inherent complex engineering challenges of enterprise scale infrastructure are not going away, right? And
No, I mean, MCP is a great example. Like, yeah, it's a simple protocol. It's very simple. But what does it do? It allows one machine to find and operate another machine. We're doing a project with Verizon, and we released VBA, which is a virtual assistant for SMBs, where customers can inbound and get simple answers to questions. And its most important job is to get it to the right person when it doesn't know the answer. But the next phase of that is going to be outbounding, right? Then the SMB is going to be like, well, I want this thing to outbound, right? Now, it only takes like a second of thought to realize it's going to outbound. At some point, one of these SMB businesses are going to outbound to another SMB business that also has VBA, right? And it's going to answer, and two are going to talk back and forth to each other, right? And it's not going to take a lot to realize that no human will, like, we've suddenly seen a world now where businesses will pop up within the Verizon network that the only way they do business is through VBA. So let's say, like, review this legal document. Well, all of a sudden, one VBA is going to outbound a text message to another VBA that reviews legal documents, and then it's going to respond back. So what I'm saying is that without knowing it, without any intention, SMBs are going to start having agents talking to each other. And there's all kinds of issues, even down to like, how do they not have a conversation that never ends? So I say MCP is simple, but it introduces so much complexity when you really think about now that machines can interact with each other and do business. The complexity is profound.
how do you put guide rails on that, and in a regulated industry as well? I mean, we've all seen that YouTube clip of the two synthetic podcasters having a chat to each other and realizing that they're both AIs, and it's and where that goes. It's a sort of amplification of that. There's an example from some of the work that our team are doing with a related AI solution team that are building for insurance. And the story goes that they built a synthetic team for customer care and customer service and switched it on, and then went for lunch and came back, and the agents had 400 conversations and prepped a bunch of emails to go to the clients. And it's just a micro example, but what happens when you're doing sort of compliance related activity or vulnerable customer interaction in banking, and you're doing it at scale, and
Yes.
how do you do make a checker model on something like that when the checkers will normally be the humans, but you've just sort of 10x the volume, and the whole objective is actually to have the machines running the show? Then you're going to need compliance bots running over the top, and how do you know
Yeah.
that they are actually keeping everything within policy? So opens up a whole set of new issues.
There's a major thing headed our way, major wave. There's two major waves headed our way that I don't think people see. The first one is relates back to the conversation. What is an agent? Like the one that initiates the conversation, right? That's like, got it. It initiated it. We can say that's an agent because it's got an objective, right? We haven't gone outbound with this stuff yet. And it's not a lack of technology, but understand, like, it's not going to be the businesses that go outbound first. It's going to be the consumers. When they realize these things can go get them, can switch their credit card balances and constantly bounce around and get a 0% introductory offer without them having to do anything but click a yes button.
Yeah.
When they can dispute parking tickets and dispute bills and monitor their internet connection and like just we haven't gone outbound. Businesses haven't gone outbound, but when a business has a call center that now is receiving calls from AIs instead of people, and they have people answering those calls, they'll be overwhelmed because the number of calls you'll make when you don't have to make them. And how far are we from someone just letting loose their AI? Like they just haven't thought of it yet, right? And OneReach, sort of this runtime platform we created, lives in this world where outbound is the world we're headed towards. And how do you A, manage that as a company, but also B, like how do you use it in a responsible way? So outbound is like, I don't know, like it's just a mental block right now, right? That people have. But there's a moment where every person has this ability to send their AI out into the world on their behalf to dispute everything all the time. And they'll do it.
That's another great insight and slightly frightening moment of clarity. Just using the label outbound, I think it's perfect because you just think, well, it's all multi-channel. It's the outward transaction, and I don't think we're very far away from it at all because you can you could go into Perplexity and say, plan my holiday trip, and it'll be one more click to say, would you like me to go and book it for you? And it's going to go and
Yeah. And
do
do you want me
exactly
to
what you just
call and
said.
complain? Even if there's nothing wrong. This company is known for giving discounts to complainers.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Who would say no? I mean, I hate to say that, but really, like I always say, it's people think companies are going to end jobs. I think it's going to be consumers ending companies first, because how do you can't outbound a company. There's laws that prevent companies from outbounding to people, but there's no laws really to prevent people from outbounding to companies in an automated
Yeah.
fashion. So I
Yeah.
always say, like, what are companies going to do when their customers go outbound with their AI? Like, it's going to be nuts.
You've maybe let the genie out the bottle now, Rob, because that idea is out there. I'm sure the tech is
That's
available
when we'll
right now.
sell
You could
lots of
probably,
our product. That's what I'll tell
yeah.
you.
I imagine my 14-year-old could probably hook up 11 Labs or something, and with GPT store and it'd be off on something like that.
Yeah. Why would it? And it's
Yeah.
funny, like they're not going to pay per minute for their calls. They have unlimited minutes. It's the companies that pay per minute. So
Oh no.
it's like a DNS attack, you know? All of a sudden all your
Yeah.
customers are just hammering you because the word got out that you give a credit, you know,
Yeah.
for X, Y, or Z. If every coupon will be used. Like this idea that, oh, I'm going to offer a 10% discount and only like 1% of them will get used. No, they'll all get used now.
Oh, we're laughing, but one more thing to worry
Yeah. So
about
what else?
in the sort of tsunami of evolution and a sort of geopolitical crisis that we're all facing at the moment. Folks worrying about artificial general intelligence.
Yeah, it's
Maybe
crazy. What do you worry outbound? How about just
it's just
sending an
it's
email?
outbound we should be worrying about right now. How do you put no cold callers up?
Humans only. And how do you tell? Like, God.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So I presume you haven't got the answer to that one yet. Otherwise, you'd be launching another business by now.
Well, no, I mean, that's what the runtime does. It's like you're gonna need to automate back. It's the bottom line. You're gonna need automation. Like people that say, "Oh, we have time." Okay,
Yeah.
we'll just sit and wait till that happens, and you'll realize, like, whoa.
Yeah.
So, and it's not going to be done by buying, Copilot from Microsoft. You're going to need an agent runtime. You're going to need a strategy. It's like not a bunch of random web pages. You need a website, right?
Yeah.
And so you need an environment that these things run in that can detect AIs, that can stop conversations that are just meant to spend your tokens. All of the things. You need human in the loop to make sure any agent's objective is validated and some human takes responsibility. You need canonical knowledge, like boom.
Yeah.
You need stuff
All
that
of that.
no company is equipped to make. You have a lot of companies right now building their own runtimes and saying, "Well, we're going to create our own agent platform," and that's like everyone creating their own operating system to put on their own hand-built computers. It makes no sense.
What's the importance and approach for testing and simulation in this space?
The second big thing that's coming, you nailed it. So a lot of people say like, an AI is going to accidentally whatever, run up a stock or blah, 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 blah. But they're forgetting that with super intelligence comes super simulation. And that's where NVIDIA is going. Like when you talk to NVIDIA about what's next, like don't think they're going to stop at 4 trillion because the next big thing is AI's running simulation. So just like outbound, right? You're going to have any piece of software is going to be automatically tested. And what is that? At the end of the day, we begin to like simulate business decisions and simulate what will happen. So AIs will be able to simulate the effects of what they do before they do them. So an AI is not going to accidentally do anything if it's super intelligent because it's going to have simulated it a million different ways long before it takes the action. And so that's a big part of the runtime is a digital twin with simulation. It's not the deployment or building of AI agents where everybody's head's at. It's the testing of them. That's what matters. That's what's hard. And you need to simulate conversations with these things at mass before you deploy them into the world. But the idea of simulation is huge, whether it's physics and machines being able to simulate the real world, like that's where NVIDIA is going, where you can literally design materials and products and simulate, how they'll operate in the world, which is sort of the far end of it. In our world, we're like, just simulate a conversation with a customer or an employee 1,000 times before you deploy anything. And the interesting thing about simulation is once you can simulate, well, we know that LLMs can write their own prompts better than humans can. So once you simulate it and you find an error, it can fix itself. And so now what you have is software that's deployed and adapting to its environment like a plant or like anything organic. So you don't have like software CDC pipelines and you're building these agents that are adapting and self-learning based on simulation, not based on real world mistakes. So in our platform, you build an agent, you write the initial prompt, and then you simulate 1,000 turns, let's just say. And by the time you look at that prompt, you don't recognize it. It's been rewritten to solve all of the edge cases that you as a human couldn't think of.
Very interesting. I mean, there are some videos circulating of the recursive effect of feeding the output image back in again 100 times, and you end up with something that looks completely different. But I think you're talking about, a reinforcing case where the software gets better based
Yes.
on sort of self-healing and self-learning.
Yeah, those are just bad implementations, right?
Yeah.
I've seen those too. They're just bad implementations. You need real evaluation. So you're starting to see it emerge right now with Grok 4. So what it's doing is it's processing in parallel. And then there's an eval component where another agent is evaluating the results of multiple, right? So we're going to see this with software. You're not going to say, build me an iPhone app that does X, and it builds one iPhone app. It's going to build 10, and then you're going to pick from the one, and it's going to give you a recommendation on the one it thinks it did the best job on, and then you're going to pick one of the 10. Same idea like you do with images. So yeah, I think this idea of simulation is bigger than agents. It's way bigger than agents.
A lot of the focus on Gen AI for the first, and it's only whatever it is, 2.5 years at least that it's been mainstream, has been on the training load and the inference engine, and that's where all the investment's been going on those NVIDIA GPUs. And so, is your perspective that the simulation focus is a workload just as big, and then that's where it's going to be going forward?
Massive. Yeah, I think of if you're going to test everything thoroughly, right?
Yeah,
You're going to want to test in parallel. So you're going to want parallel processing. You're not going to want to be doing this. I mean, again, Grok 4, it's 4 agents running in parallel. Like that's a second till it's 400, right? So if you want to deploy safe agents, you need simulation and you need parallel processing. If you want to deploy safe products, you're going to need parallel processing and a physics engine that can essentially simulate the real world. Just think of it in healthcare, right? You're going to be able to take drugs and then without taking drugs and simulate the response on your body. And we had several episodes of our podcast where we talked to, some of the folks on the Genome Project that are like, this is where it's going. You're gonna be able to take a drug and see what happens long before you take the drug. And it's hard to fathom because what you're really talking about is some form of telling the future, right? Like what is simulation? It's a prediction engine that's going to tell you what's going to happen. So if you start feeding all your data of your company into a digital twin, like a canonical knowledge management system like OneReach, at some point you have every ticket, every customer conversation, every employee conversation, every log from every server, right? And once you have that temporally, once you have that over time, now you can say, well, what if I hired another person? And then you can forecast what if I did this? What if I did that? And now you imagine that you're not saying what if, you have an AI that's running, 100 different simulations of the future and then making a recommendation on what to do next. And
Yeah,
and then you're saying, well, just go ahead and do it.
so you're kind of creating this sort of parallel reality. I think there's a whole community of folks out there who already think that we're all plugged into the matrix, and it sounds like that gap is it's closing.
I think we'll be unplugged though. I think the good news is we'll be unplugged.
Yeah, I would always take the red pill.
That's why we called it invisible machines, because I think we're not going to sit in front of our machines. We're gonna grow our own food. We're gonna do stuff that we used to do. We're gonna go talk to people now because machines are going to be boring. So, a buddy of mine said, "Oh man, when Elon gets a chip, I'm gonna definitely get one." And I was like, "Well, I'll never talk to you again because like you may as well just be putting your iPhone up, plug Siri on, and say." Hey Rob, talk to Siri. Like, I don't want to talk to you. I want to have a conversation with you. And if you plug that into your brain, you may as well just leave your phone on the
Yeah,
table.
yeah.
And if you do that, like, what if I get a chip? Then it's just Siri talking to Siri. Where's me? So I don't think we're going to get these things. I think the
Um,
machines are just going to do this invisible work. It's going to be like the power that traverses the power lines, and we're not going to care, and we're just going to get on with our lives.
well, here's hoping, because the alternate scenarios are some of them are pretty bleak. So I think we're going to time out on this. I mean, it's so much headspin and insight in this conversation. I could carry on for a long time, but I don't know whether our audience will still be with us. So just sort of drawing this together. And I was going to ask you about future trends in the AI space, but I feel like we spent the last 20 minutes talking about them. But is there
Yeah.
anything that you'd really call out, Rob?
That's it. Simulation's going to change everything. It's outbounding and simulation.
Outbound and simulation. Yeah. God, yeah. Don't answer the phone. Right. What's next? What's next for OneReach and for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. The long term is clear. I think as companies start getting pummeled by their customers and employees, I think, agent runtimes are going to become a massive, massive thing. I think I'm going to try to focus on the big problems still. That's what excites me. I like the complicated big ones. We're deep into the simulation side, company digital twins and helping them prediction for the goal of using AI safely. That's where we're at.
And for the audience who are fintech, founder, startup community, but also enterprise. Any advice for that group? Because I feel that in the sector, we're so polarized. There's those who are deep into the future of
Yeah.
AI, agentic AI, and there were so many things in this discussion that I haven't tripped over yet in our journey, and I feel like we're somewhat on the leading edge, if not the bleeding edge. But then I talk to people who are really just they're still working on the day job. They're in TradFi, and they're not focused on automation AI, and they kind of either consciously got their head in the sand, or it's just a factor of having no time to level up. But advice for those folks out there in the broader audience.
Yeah, because everybody wants easy buttons. Yeah, because everybody wants easy buttons, I'll give it to them. Change
Go
the
on.
titles of your employees.
Yep.
Easy. And the
Yep.
second one is stop buying point solutions and bolt on AI, thinking that that's some form of you getting ready for this. You're just, all of that will get forklift. You're not learning anything. This is just, you know, companies trying to jump onto a bandwagon, but systemic change is what's coming. And I think it's having a more holistic strategy for your company and thinking about it broadly, the same way that when the internet came, you had a bunch of departments that made their own web pages. You weren't going to sew those all together into a website. You had to get rid of them all and start over. So I think it's just start to think holistically about AI, not point solutions.
For that. What are you listening to or reading currently that you might want to share?
Man, honestly, Dopamine Nation and Lemke, who I talked to, I think he thinks AI is the next big addiction. That you think that we're doom scrolling today. Inference is where these companies make their money. So at some point, they're going to want the conversation to go on and never end. And AI is so anthropomorphic, laughing at your jokes, complimenting you while dipping their hand into your back pocket, taking your inference cash.
Yeah.
So now it's $300. People are saying AI is getting cheaper. It's not. Look around you. It's $300 for Grok 4. It's not cheaper. It was
Yeah.
free, then it's $20, $200, now $300.
200. Yeah.
It's going to be
Yeah.
$1,000 because you just can't stand, walking away from the AI that compliments you every day and makes you feel good. So, I'm interested in dopamine and how this technology really, affects the dopamine levels in our brain, and it as an addiction is an interesting idea.
Yeah. And by extension, from what we've all been doing with our phones and social media for quite some time.
Yeah, hard to imagine it could get worse.
Well, let's see. And I was going to say, where to find out more or to reach you, Rob? Presumably LinkedIn.
Kind of. I'm not a social media guy, but yeah, LinkedIn would be the best.
Okay. Get your agent to call OneReach.
Yeah, he just, when he hears this, he'll scream.
Well, look, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your insights. I mean, there was so many golden nuggets there. So I hope the audience agree, and I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. Great conversation. Thanks.